The pen that Jeannin gave me when I graduated from my MBA was far too expensive to use. However, when my 2 cheap pens and the micro ballpoint ran out, I finally started using it. Jeannin smiled warmly when I opened her gift and told her the pen was beautiful. But she radiated pride and joy when she saw me using it a year later. I told her how much I loved it and how I wished I had had it to sign my divorce papers. I met Jeannin right after college. We had mutual friends, and we often gathered at someone's house or found a bar or club to dance and savor our last moments of freedom. Many of us had job offers lined up, others were starting graduate school in the fall, and those without concrete plans knew we had to get serious about making them before summer ended. I had known 2 friends, Jeff and Paul, since 3rd grade. We always called them Matt because their parents, being Catholic, had named them after saints. They also had 5 sisters. Their lake cabin was larger than most, given the size of their family, so we often went there. It was a Tuesday, about halfway through the summer, when Matt and Jeff picked me up in their old family van. It was a great car for many reasons, but mainly because it could carry a lot of people and gear for whatever adventure we were planning. After stopping for a case of beer and 3 bags of ice to keep them cold, we headed to the lake. Matt and Jeff were twins, but you'd never meet 2 people so different yet so in sync. Matt had dark hair and brown eyes. He was a bit reserved but incredibly funny when he spoke. Jeff, on the other hand, was blonde with green eyes, always chatting and friends with everyone. Matt handled logistics, while Jeff was the social guy. He spent the 2-hour drive to the lake on the phone, coordinating with friends who were in town. Matt got us to the lake before anyone else, so we prepped the pontoon boat with coolers for food and drinks. Our timing was perfect because, as soon as we finished, people started arriving. Within about 45 minutes, there were around 18 people running back and forth, loading the boat with snacks, beer, water, sodas, footballs, towels, sunscreen, swimsuits, and who knows what else. Matt tried desperately to organize everyone. After another 15 minutes of chaos, we were all on the boat, except Jim, who was using the bathroom at the house. He had to jump off the dock and swim to catch up as we set off. We were headed for another fantastic summer day on the water. Growing up in a small town your whole life, you tend to know just about everyone, or at least recognize them after years of playing on sports teams, joining music bands, debate clubs, theater productions, birthday parties, or just walking around the mall. I knew everyone on the boat that day, at least by sight, except for 2 women who came with Jenny Smith. Besides Jenny, Matt, and Jeff, my closest circle included Angel, Tony, and Billy, friends I had known since grade school. I knew the others from high school. None of us were athletes, but we were pretty active, so we all looked good and were in decent shape. One of the new women was tall and slim with blonde hair and strikingly pale blue eyes that were a bit unsettling. The other was shorter, with thick black hair, a constant smile that suggested she knew a secret joke, and dark brown eyes that sparkled with mischief. I've never been a Casanova. I dated casually in high school and had 3 serious relationships with women in college. But I also spent plenty of Fridays hanging out with friends and roommates. When I saw Jeannin, though, I felt an irresistible pull toward her. To my surprise, I didn't feel nervous at all when I walked over to where she was sitting with Jenny and the tall blonde woman. "Hi, Jenny, when are we getting married?" I joked as I approached her. I've known Jenny since kindergarten, and in high school, we made a silly promise to marry each other if we didn't find anyone else. We'd never dated, but we were always comfortable with each other. "Just give me a couple more days. I'm still hoping David Henry hasn't lost my number," Jenny replied with a laugh. I laughed too, but what caught my attention was when one, sitting nearby, also chuckled. That surprised me. I turned to her and extended my hand. "Hi, I'm Pitt. Are you new to the group?" "Nice to meet you," she said, shaking my hand. "I'm one. And you must be a poet," I teased. I'm Jenny's cousin, and this is Elisa, Wen replied with a warm smile. Elisa, the tall blonde sitting next to her, joined in with a grin. A poet? Unfortunately, no. I study finance, which is about as creative as a monkey with a typewriter. I laughed again, and so did Wen. How do you fit into all of this? I asked. Jenny chimed in before Wen could respond. Wen is my cousin, and Elisa is her roommate from college. They're heading to Toronto. Elisa has a job there. What kind of work? I asked Elisa, mostly out of politeness. I studied linguistics and got hired by a startup working on more accurate voice interfaces for cars, appliances, and basically anything you interact with, she explained. Wow. I didn't think it was possible, but finance just got even more boring, I joked with a playful grimace before glancing back at Wen. And I suppose you're a world-famous pianist or a medical researcher solving big problems? I teased. Maybe I should apply for a grant to study guys with limited vocabularies. It could save millions, Wen quipped, her humor catching me off guard. It turned out Wen was studying business and looking for a position in marketing or sales. Her natural enthusiasm and energy made it clear she'd do well in that field. She was exactly what you'd picture as someone full of life, super fun and incredibly witty. She made me laugh countless times that day. While everyone on the pontoon seemed to be mingling and moving around, I found myself staying near Wen. Jeff, our friend Tiffany, who had followed me around most of my senior year, and Kevin, who ran cross-country with Matt and me, joined us for a while. But I didn't stray more than a meter from Wen the entire afternoon and evening. When we said goodbye at sunset, I had her number, and she had mine. We both seemed equally excited about it. Wen's house was about a 45-minute drive from mine, close enough to meet regularly but far enough to avoid bumping into each other by chance. That probably wasn't a bad thing for a budding relationship, less chance for misunderstandings or petty jealousy in those early, awkward days. We connected immediately, and after just a few dates, I knew this woman was everything to me. She was so lively and energetic, a constant burst of attention mixed with humor and joy. Wen was spontaneous, adventurous, and always up for anything, which complemented my more deliberate approach to life. We shared similar tastes in music, singer-songwriters and blues, and loved Thai and Vietnamese cuisine as much as classic American comfort food. We also enjoyed hiking, swimming in lakes, horror movies, and TV comedies. And we didn't just love dogs, we both had a soft spot for German shepherds. Wen's expressive eyes, warm smile, and graceful presence left me captivated every time I was near her. It was clear we were both interested in each other. We went out at least half a dozen times as a couple and many more in group outings with our circle of friends and acquaintances before I brought up the topic of exclusivity. I was a bit nervous, of course, even though I was sure she felt deeply for me. There's nothing like making yourself vulnerable to remind you that you can never be 100% certain of anything. We had gone out for a casual dinner and then watched a better-than-average slasher movie. Afterward, we were parked in her parents' driveway in front of a dark house. We had been kissing for about half an hour when we gradually stopped, catching our breath. "You're incredible," Wen said, breathing heavily. "I love how you make me feel. And I love making you feel that way. You smell so good, you drive me crazy," I replied. "Flattery will get you everywhere, young man," she teased with a mischievous smile. She was so enchanting when we were close, and her soft yet lingering kisses always kept me captivated. "I'd really like to do this," she whispered. "Would you like to get away for a weekend before I start work? I'd love to spend time with you." "Oh, I think that's a great idea. Where were you thinking of going?" Wen asked eagerly. "There's a resort on a private lake about 3 hours away," I suggested. It wasn't cheap, but I wanted our first getaway together to be special. "I've always believed you get what you pay for." "I was thinking of Malone, it's the end of the season, so I'm sure we can find a place," I said. "You sure know how to get my attention." I've always wanted to go there. Have you been before? Wen asked. No, never. My parents went there for one of their anniversaries and loved it, I explained. They said it was the perfect place for special occasions. So, you don't take all your girlfriends there? Wen teased playfully. Well, it's your turn, you're my only girlfriend, I assured her. That's so sweet. You always know just what to say to me, Wen said with a radiant smile that lit up the dark car. She kissed me gently. I waited, hoping for more, but she seemed to have finished her thought. I've never been afraid to address things head-on, no matter how uncomfortable they might seem. So, as we sat there, I asked, am I the only guy you're seeing? Wen looked at me with eyes full of love, her smile somehow changing but not losing its glow. I don't have room in my heart for anyone else. You're always in my thoughts, even when you're not with me, she said. I kissed her, first tenderly, then with more passion, and she responded wholeheartedly. Her openness and warmth always amazed me. We kissed for another 20 minutes before I walked her to the door. She moved with unsteady legs, and we shared one last kiss before she went inside. The long drive home gave me plenty of time to replay the evening in my mind. Although I hadn't heard her explicitly say we were exclusive, I knew from a business communications course that people express themselves differently. Just because she didn't use the exact words I did didn't mean she didn't feel the same. In her own way, she told me she wasn't seeing anyone else, and that warmed me inside. My job at a regional accounting firm started after Labor Day, and the first few weeks were busy. While I wasn't particularly passionate about accounting, the interpersonal and analytical skills I was developing were crucial for my long-term goal of moving into management consulting. Because I was so busy and exhausted from studying during the day, most of my contact with Wen in those first 2 or 3 weeks was over the phone rather than in person. Wen was also busy. She was in the final stages of interviewing for a sales position at an office equipment company. Whenever we talked, she was lively and upbeat, her bubbly and fun personality lifting my spirits no matter how tired I was. We spent both weekends of September together, and every time we were together, I felt complete. I had booked a room in Malone for the last weekend of September, and the anticipation for our trip was off the charts. We both knew we would be physically close that weekend, and since we hadn't had many opportunities to relieve some of that tension, it only grew. Our phone conversations became filled with subtle hints and playful jokes. I swear I could sense Wen's excitement as soon as she got in the car for our special weekend. Even though we were just holding hands, the energy between us was palpable. She shifted in her seat during the entire drive, and I had to focus more on driving than usual to keep my mind from wandering to images of us enjoying our luxurious room. Wen was incredible, and I was eager to see how the reality of being together matched my dreams. At the hotel, I checked in at the massive dark wood counter in the lobby and picked up 2 key cards. We carried our small suitcases to our room on the top floor. We planned to change and then head to a restaurant for dinner, but I mentioned Wen is spontaneous and amazing, right? As soon as we closed the door behind us, she wrapped her arms around me, kissed me passionately, and practically pulled me to the large bed. We collapsed onto it, and she began tugging at my clothes. My polo shirt and jeans went flying in different directions, quickly followed by her snug sweater and sweatpants. I don't even know what happened to our socks and shoes, but soon we were on the sheets, completely lost in each other. I had never felt so out of control. Oh God, oh God, oh God, I kept repeating, barely aware of my own words. Then I heard her whisper, I love you so much. I love you too, Wen. So much, I replied. We stayed close, catching our breath and grounding ourselves in the moment. I leaned on my elbows to avoid putting my full weight on her, but she wrapped her arms around my neck and pulled me closer. I don't want to hurt you, I said softly. Then don't hold back. Let me feel you completely, she whispered with a smile. You're my dream woman, Miss Patterson, I said, meaning every word. She laughed softly, her breath tickling my ear and sending shivers down my spine. "And you make me so happy, Mr. Patterson," she replied. I kissed her, trying to convey through my lips what felt inadequate to express in words. She kissed me back with the same depth of feeling. We lay side by side, gazing into each other's eyes and caressing one another gently. It was the most beautiful moment of my life. It wasn't long before we began again. Our second time was less frantic but just as passionate and full of energy. Eventually, we got up, still planning to have dinner later than originally planned. But I mentioned wine is spontaneous, right? Showering together added a playful, energizing start to our evening. Dinner ended up being burgers and fries from room service, and we spent the night sleeping closely intertwined, as if we couldn't get enough of each other's presence. The next morning, I woke up to her gorgeous brown eyes gazing at me lovingly. I couldn't help but grin as she smiled warmly. I had opened my heart to one, and she had embraced me completely. "Good morning, love," she said. "Good morning," I replied. "What would you like to do today?" she asked with a laugh. "Well, not what you're thinking," I teased. "Maybe we should get breakfast and see where the day takes us," I suggested. "Don't you think you've had enough already?" she replied with a raised eyebrow and a wide smile. "I could never get enough of you," I said sincerely. "You always know just the right thing to say," she said as she hugged me, kissed me tenderly, and then began untangling her arms and legs from mine. "I need to use the bathroom, and then we need to get out of this room before we get sidetracked again." We went to breakfast and then took a leisurely walk along one of the trails surrounding the lake. It was truly beautiful, especially with the leaves starting to change colors. But I couldn't focus on the scenery because my eyes couldn't stay off one. Every time I looked at her, I'd catch her looking at me. It was a beautiful connection we shared. The rest of the weekend was just as magical. We couldn't get enough of each other. We made love again on Saturday night, twice, and then slowly and tenderly before leaving on Sunday afternoon. Our drive back was quiet again, but this time it was the quiet of two people completely content and fulfilled. One got a job in sales and, as expected, excelled. Within a few months, she was consistently ranked among the top 3 salespeople at her company. My work was also going well. I mainly reviewed corporate financial statements but also handled accounting tasks for some nonprofits and small firms affiliated with our main partners. While I didn't love the detailed nature of accounting, I enjoyed visiting clients and learning about their businesses. After a few months, I felt confident enough to propose changes not only to their accounting processes but also to their business models. I received excellent feedback for my work, as well as a raise and a performance bonus for taking on extra clients during a busy period and guiding them successfully through it. Wen and I grew even closer, spending as much time together as we could. We couldn't get enough of each other. I wasn't exactly inexperienced when we met, and neither was she, but I had never experienced the level of connection we shared. When initiated things as often as I did, it's safe to say we were both insatiable. As a sign of our deepening relationship, we persuaded our families to coordinate their Christmas celebrations so we could attend both. My parents adored Wen, and her parents seemed pleased with me. We vaguely talked about renting an apartment together after the new year, and neither family raised any serious objections. So that's what we did. Living together required some adjustments, and it was our first real challenge as a couple. Simple decisions about everyday things, like how to organize the kitchen and closets, schedule cleaning, or properly clean the bathroom, revealed differences we hadn't anticipated. Frustrations over these small inconsistencies came up frequently during the first few months. However, we were committed to each other and overcame each conflict with kindness most of the time. Our personalities continued to complement each other well, and our love softened any hurt feelings, especially when we remembered to apologize for careless comments or passive-aggressive behavior. Many of our friends were going through similar experiences, which helped put things in perspective. Seeing their challenges without the emotional lens of our immediate situation gave us new insights, making it easier to resolve some of our disagreements. Angie lived with her partner, Elle, and Billy shared a place with a friend, though they claimed it was purely platonic. We weren't entirely sure about that. Tony and Brian were roommates in a small cabin outside of town, while Matt and Jeff lived as bachelors in an apartment far from their family home. We still saw everyone frequently. Angie's boyfriend, Tom, was nice enough, but he joined our group late and struggled to find his place among us. Jenny and Matt were in an on-again, off-again relationship, so we saw them more often. Their relationship was hard to pin down. It seemed comfortable and affectionate, but it was unclear how serious it really was. I asked Matt about his feelings, and when talked to Jenny, but neither of them was very forthcoming. I wasn't sure how passionate Matt and Jenny's feelings were for each other, but they were affectionate and seemed very comfortable together. Tony and Jeff were still living a carefree lifestyle, although Jeff appeared to have more success. He was good-looking and could walk into any place, and within 5 minutes, he'd be chatting with the most attractive women in the room. Jeff had a way with words and often left with someone, regardless of their relationship status, single, engaged, married, or divorced. As he liked to say, he always asked and never pressured, and I believed him. He had no shortage of women interested in him. Tony, being himself, was a bit more selective, as he was looking for a relationship. Brian, on the other hand, was also handsome and had more successes than failures, but he never stayed with the same woman for more than a night. He enjoyed sharing details of his escapades, often in too much detail, which made me uncomfortable. Once one and I adjusted to the realities of living together, our love blossomed. We were physically affectionate several times a week, often more than once in a single evening. I never grew tired of her, either physically or emotionally. We moved in sync with each other, sharing an active rhythm in all aspects of life. We often experimented together, not only in our relationship but also with our conversations. We talked about everything, from national politics, where we debated whether the Democrats were bad or the Republicans worse, to business, music, and even the colors for our apartment. She liked pastel oranges and yellows, while I preferred deep blues and greens. Both of us wanted children. I dreamed of having 3 daughters, while she hoped for a son and a daughter. We also agreed on having dogs, particularly Australian Shepherds. We had been living together for nearly a year when I started applying to business schools. We had spoken about marriage in a general sense but hadn't committed to anything yet. I still needed to figure out more about my career and future plans. I didn't want to commit too soon, and one encouraged me to pursue the best school that would accept me, even if it meant being apart temporarily. I'm not a fan of prestige for the sake of it, I told her. After all, there's no secret course taught at Harvard or Duke that my local Catholic university doesn't offer. In the end, it's about the connections, with businesses, schools, and classmates who become friends. Since I wanted to stay close to my hometown, St. Thomas University, or the local branch of the state university seemed like good options. Even if I went to Stanford or Rice, I doubted those schools would have strong connections back to our small Midwestern town of 60,000 people. When St. Thomas accepted me into their full MBA program, I decided to go for it, but I still felt the need for Wen's approval. One night at dinner, I brought it up, a little nervously. "Sweetheart, I'm thinking maybe state would be my best option for business school," I said, testing the waters. She frowned slightly. "Seriously? State? It's not even the best program in town, let alone the country. I know you can do better, much better." "I guess," I said, hesitating. "But business school isn't cheap. They don't offer many scholarships, and I think I could graduate with honors at state, which might help with job offers." She smiled affectionately but with determination. "You'll graduate with honors from any school you choose. I can see how smart and hardworking you are," she said, her voice softening as she looked into my eyes. "Please don't let me be the reason you settle for less than the best." What could I say? One knew me so well. But you're more important to me than the degree. I don't want to be far away from you, I confessed. She melted, smiling as always. You're the sweetest person, she said. I love you so much. But I'm not going anywhere. Wherever you go, there are planes, trains, and buses to bring us back together. It's an expensive solution to a problem we don't need to have. What's the best program in the area? Probably St. Thomas, I said. I saw they climbed in the national rankings last year and were already among the top 10 in the Midwest. Maybe I should apply there. It's a reputable school, and we could wake up together every morning. Wen seemed skeptical but didn't dismiss the idea. I was confident that the more she thought about it, the more she'd like, or at least accept, the plan. That's exactly what happened. So, I went to St. Thomas. Wen had always been confident, but knowing I had sacrificed a bit of academic prestige for her seemed to strengthen our relationship. We always had a give-and-take dynamic, but if someone had asked, I'd admit I probably gave a little more. It wasn't that one was inattentive or distracted when she was with me, but she was more likely to make plans with friends that didn't include me or grab drinks after work with colleagues. However, after I started the MBA program at St. Thomas, it felt like she came home more often instead of going out with coworkers. She put her phone aside more frequently when we were together and paid more attention to me. I felt like the happiest man in the world. Business school was going well, just as Wen had predicted. I decided to study full-time, believing in the efficiency of focusing on one task rather than trying to juggle too much at once, like working and studying simultaneously. Of course, not everyone has that option, but since I could afford to take 21 months off work, I went for it. I was among the top 4 students in my class and received significant attention from professors and classmates, which translated well into job offers after graduation. Even though my undergraduate degree was in finance, I chose to specialize in finance for my MBA too. I enjoyed the quantitative side of things, and consulting firms appreciated people who could build models and forecasts. I proposed to Wen at the start of my second year of business school during one of our favorite hikes. It was a perfect autumn day. The leaves were halfway through their color change, with vibrant yellows and reds mixed with green. The sun was shining, but fluffy clouds dotted the sky. The air was cool enough to keep us comfortable during the hike but warm enough for us to sit in the sun in our t-shirts without feeling cold. I thought it was a metaphor for our life together, past, present, and future, perfectly balanced. Wen was sitting on a rock at our favorite overlook. I knelt down, pretending to tie my shoelace, then retied it. She took a quick sip from her water bottle, gazing at the forest-covered hills. "Wen, my love," I said softly. She turned to me, taking another quick sip of water. "Will you marry me?" I asked as I pulled out the ring I had bought a few weeks earlier. She froze for a moment, then her eyes filled with tears, and her face lit up with the brightest smile. She threw herself into my arms, wrapping them tightly around my neck. We fell to the ground, nose to nose, and she kissed me again and again until finally pressing her lips firmly against mine in a long, heartfelt embrace. "I love you so much," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I would love to spend the rest of my life with you." I smiled as tears welled up in my own eyes. "I'm the luckiest man in the world." "I love you more than I can express with words," I replied. That beautiful day, we celebrated our love at our favorite overlook. Wen's spontaneous nature shone through as we shared an intimate moment, our emotions at their peak. Our wedding was planned for the following summer, at the end of June, after my graduation in mid-May. My parents hosted a graduation party for me, but we kept it modest, knowing we'd soon be asking friends and family to celebrate with us again. My parents gifted me a beautiful leather set, a bag, a briefcase, and a card holder. Wen, of course, found the perfect pen for me, though it took me several months to realize it. Her card was simple and ultimately prophetic: "I hope this pen writes our future together. With love, always, Wen." The wedding was like any other, yet it was ours, which made it incredible and unforgettable. The flowers arrived late, but that was the only mishap. In front of most of our friends and nearly all our family, we solemnly exchanged vows, wedding rings, and smiles. We posed for photos, enjoyed a dinner with options of beef, chicken, or vegetarian dishes, and danced the night away, letting go of all the stress from planning and executing the wedding. Some friends had a bit too much to drink. We did the obligatory garter and bouquet toss, cut the cake, and then headed to our hotel room. I carried one over the threshold. We showered together and then shared a tender and loving moment before falling asleep, exhausted but happy. The next morning, we had lunch with our immediate family before heading off on our honeymoon, a week and a couple of days in Vancouver. Those 9 days were magnificent, and even the usual travel inconveniences couldn't dampen our celebration of love. One was everything I had ever wanted in a partner, and through her words and actions, she showed me she felt the same about me. In short, we were completely happy with each other. We returned home as newlyweds, committed, loving, and ready to embrace our marriage, careers, and everything life had in store for us. One started working in sales for a tech company that sold hardware and partnered with software providers to deliver custom solutions to local and regional businesses. The learning curve was steep, but she adapted quickly, with only a few minor missteps, and her boss was already hinting at moving her into a sales manager role within a couple of years. I joined a boutique consulting firm specializing in consumer product expansions with strong valuation prospects for mergers and acquisitions, which became my area of expertise. I saw it as a place to grow and potentially become an integral part of the firm as it expanded. In summary, we were both quite happy with our jobs. Having lived together for 3 years before our marriage, we didn't settle into domestic life the way many young couples do. We maintained an active social life with our friends, hosting house parties, dining out, enjoying trivia nights at bars, attending concerts in the city, and playing in recreational softball and soccer leagues. We did what everyone else was doing, but our friend group began to split along predictable lines, singles and couples. Jenny and Matt still had an ambiguous relationship, oscillating between hanging out with one and me or joining Angie and her husband Tom, who had married a few months before us, and Tony with his fiancée. On the other side were Jeff, Brian, and Brian's new roommate, Noah. The singles were often ready to call it a night earlier, which led to some friendly teasing. "Oh, you're leaving already? Guess it's past 5, no more happy hour for the seniors tonight. Good luck, guys, we've already found our partners for the night. Hurrying home for your evening meds. Good luck at the STI roulette tonight. Hit your 1 beer limit already. Don't forget to polish your glasses before heading out." One, however, often wanted to stay out longer than the rest of us couples. She loved getting out of the house, exploring new situations, and thrived in social settings. I generally paid attention to her needs during our intimate moments, but on those nights when she was quieter than usual on the ride home, I'd make extra efforts to show her care and affection, and she appreciated it. Before long, the jokes extended to other events and gatherings. They were always light-hearted, but there was an underlying subtext. We were moving in different circles, one group with more commitments and another with fewer. Neither of us was entirely confident about whether we were in the right group. Getting tired of their snoring yet? How do you avoid yawning through the same first date conversations every week? Still using the same old positions? Let me know when you're ready for something new. Which Nobel Prize winner is yours this week? Hey, the train called. They wanted to remind you that the condom in your pocket expired 3 years ago. A couple of years after our wedding, we started talking seriously about having children. Wen's company was seriously considering promoting her to a sales manager position. While it wouldn't have the same earning potential as her current role, it offered more regular hours and a clear career path in management, with significantly more opportunities for growth. It also seemed like a better fit for starting a family. My practice in MA valuation at my firm was thriving, and I had become a key part of it, so my future also looked promising. I had to travel a couple of times a month for 2 or 3 days at a time, which was a bit destabilizing but not something that would interfere with conceiving a child or taking care of my pregnant wife. One, however, was more hesitant than I had expected. It was clear she would put in the effort when the time came, but she seemed more reserved than I anticipated. We often talked about how much we wanted kids, even joking about names for boys and girls. We were both just a couple of years away from turning 30, so it seemed like the right time to start planning for this next step. But whenever I brought up the subject, she would pull back, not refusing outright, but clearly avoiding the conversation. I decided to take a direct approach during Thanksgiving. "Darling, what do you think about having kids?" "I want to have children with you," I said. "Let me think about it a little more," she replied. "Of course, my love. Would you like to discuss it with me? I just want to make sure I'm truly ready." "There's no going back once we take that step," she said. I let the topic rest over the holidays and tried a more indirect approach in early January. "What do you think about the name Kate for a girl?" I asked. "It's cute. It reminds me of Kate Raston." "Did you know her well?" she asked. "Not really. It just came to mind when I said the name," I replied, waiting for her to share more, but she didn't. Deciding to nudge the conversation forward, I asked, "Have you thought about our family yet?" She sighed. "There's so much happening at work right now, and with Mom's 55th birthday coming up, Dad wants me to help him plan the party." I tried again a month later. "Remember Delia from work? We went to her wedding last summer." "Of course. What about her?" One asked. "She told me today that she and her husband are expecting a baby. She's been pregnant for a couple of months. Says she can't get enough peanut butter and melon. That's great news for them. I hope her pregnancy goes well. Let me know if you need me to stock up on peanut butter," one said, and that was that. She didn't get upset or tell me to stop bringing it up, but she didn't engage with me on the subject either. It struck me as odd, given our past conversations. The rest of our interactions continued as usual. We enjoyed our time together, were physically close as often as ever, went to work, and indulged in all the activities we loved. The topic of children, however, seemed to have disappeared. Spring arrived right on time. We started going to the lake with Wen's family or mine whenever we had a free weekend. We planned a trip to the Upper Peninsula for August and kept living our lives as we had been. Life was good, but I began to feel a bit restless. The idea of having a child started to weigh on me. I'm a planner, and although I'm patient, my patience has limits. For the first time, I felt a small crack in my relationship with one. That crack seemed to widen slightly every time children were mentioned, even when it wasn't about us. Our parents hinted at wanting more grandchildren, and our friends joked about the topic occasionally. One, however, stayed silent. For Independence Day, Matt and Jeff suggested a long weekend at their family lake house, where Wen and I had first met. It seemed like everyone in our group was going. Wen and I agreed to go, as did Angie and Tom, and Brian and Noah, who brought their girlfriends. Only Tony and Dev, now married, were busy with their family in Ohio for the holiday. We agreed on our contribution to the trip and looked forward to a few days of relaxation with good friends. We decided to leave on Wednesday and return on Monday afternoon. Summer arrived right on time, and we started going to the lake with Wen's family or mine whenever we had a free weekend. We also planned a vacation to the Upper Peninsula for August and kept living our lives as usual. Life was good, but I started feeling a bit restless. The topic of having a child began to bother me. I'm a planner, and while I'm patient, my patience isn't endless. For the first time, I felt a small crack in my relationship with one, and it seemed to widen a bit every time there was any reference to children, even when it wasn't about us. Our parents would hint about wanting more grandchildren, and our friends occasionally joked about it. One, however, stayed silent and on the sidelines. For Independence Day, Matt and Jeff suggested a long weekend at their family lake house, the same place where One and I had met. It seemed like the whole group would be there. We agreed to go. Jenny, of course, would be there, along with Angie and Tom, and Brian and Noah, who brought their girlfriends. Only Tony and Dev, now married, were busy with their family in Ohio for the holiday. We coordinated what we'd contribute to the trip and looked forward to a few days of relaxation with good friends. We planned to leave on Wednesday and return Monday afternoon. The first problem arose when my firm signed a major new client, a company based in the Twin Cities that was considering acquiring a woodworking shop in rural Vermont and wanted a quick valuation. They planned an aggressive acquisition strategy and were willing to pay a premium for speed. So, we got to work. The 4th of July fell on a Sunday, making Monday a holiday, but the client still needed me on-site Monday morning. That meant traveling to Vermont on Sunday night. The town, located near Quebec, had no airport, so I'd have to fly to Portland, Maine, and drive from there. There wasn't enough time to make the trip early Sunday, so I had to fly out Saturday, cutting my weekend at the lake short. I told One, who was disappointed but understanding. The next night, we had dinner with some married friends, and One informed everyone that we'd have to leave the lake early because of my work commitments. "That's terrible," Angie said. "Why do you have to leave, then?" someone asked. "Someone has to keep an eye on him," One joked, laughing. "We're Midwesterners, we never want to be a burden. Besides, we're not taking both cars to the lake." "This is silly," Angie said. "One can drive your car, and you can come back with Tom and me." One looked at me, leaving the decision in my hands. I appreciated Angie's offer and felt a bit guilty that One would miss so much of the weekend because of my work. If it's not an issue and Wen's okay with it, I think that's a great idea. "Thanks," I said. One smiled and thanked both Angie and me. We arrived at the lake without any trouble on Wednesday and settled into our small room with a double bed. Matt and Jenny greeted us, and Jeff arrived shortly after. Brian and Noah came together, bringing Alice and Roberta with them. We hadn't met them before, but we were happy to welcome them. They arrived after dinner while we were cleaning up. The evening was lively, filled with beer and friendly banter, just as you'd expect from a reunion of old friends. We got to know Roberta, who had a great sense of humor, and Alice, who was a bit sensitive. At one point, Alice left, and Brian had to go after her to calm her down. It slowed the party a little, but the night was still fun. We were tired from the drive and the beer, and the unfamiliar bed, combined with sharing the bathroom with 4 other people, disrupted our usual nighttime routines. By the time I climbed into bed, One was already fast asleep. As usual, I woke up earlier than One the next morning. When I went downstairs for coffee, I saw Matt and Jenny packing their car. "What's going on, guys?" I asked. Matt shook his head. "Jenny got called into work, too many nurses took the weekend off." "That's terrible," I said. "They say they plan for this, but every holiday is the same," Jenny laughed. I knew I was on call, but I was hoping to dodge the bullet this time. "Sorry, Jean. Will you two be back?" I asked. Matt shook his head again. "Jenny's working overtime, and will need some rest. Besides, who wants to spend the holiday alone?" "You're a good guy, Matt," I said, "but I'll deny it if you ever repeat that." We all laughed, said our goodbyes, and waved them off. Even without Matt's leadership, we had a great day at the lake. It took us twice as long to load the pontoon without him, but once we got going, it was the same as always. We knew each other so well that the conversation flowed naturally, and with Alice and Roberta around, there was enough novelty to keep things interesting. One loved meeting new people and spent a lot of time getting to know the 2 new women. We docked just before sunset and fired up the grill again. Everyone was fairly drunk by then, and we kept drinking as Jeff and I cooked burgers and sausages. Cleanup was quick since we used disposable plates, so we were able to return to drinking beer around the fire without much delay. With Roberta and Alice feeling more comfortable, the conversation grew a bit bolder and sharper. Angie, Tom, and I teamed up to defend the honor of the married couples, and I think we held our own despite being outnumbered by the singles. There were plenty of good-natured jabs exchanged. When I noticed when yawning, I took her hand and led her upstairs to wash up before bed. I hoped for a little intimacy, but once again, our bedtime routines separated us, and by the time I crawled into bed, she was already sound asleep. Friday was another beautiful day, and although we were moving slowly, there was no rush. We took the day as it came. After a couple of cups of coffee and some pastries and fruit, we loaded up the pontoon again and headed out onto the water. Everyone was getting along well, and we went through a disproportionate amount of beer. I suspected we'd need a beer run once we returned to shore. Without Matt to guide us, our return was slow, and it was already dark when we docked. Unloading went smoothly until Tom and I tried to carry the large cooler off the boat. If we'd been sober, we would have emptied the melted water before lifting it, but we weren't, and we didn't. I walked backward, guiding the cooler, while Tom stepped onto the dock. The water in the cooler sloshed, throwing off his balance. His leg got caught between the boat and the dock, and he cried out in pain as the rough wood scraped his shin. To make matters worse, the pontoon bumped him, causing his knee to hit the dock. I dropped the cooler and grabbed him to keep him from falling into the water. I managed to hold him steady, but with his leg pinned and our coordination clouded by the alcohol, he took a few more bumps before we freed him. Jeff and I helped him back to the house. His shin was skinned from knee to ankle, and while there was a lot of blood, it wasn't gushing. After a few minutes, the bleeding slowed. None of us were in any condition to drive, and Tom felt embarrassed. He insisted he'd wrap his leg in a towel and check it in the morning. Angie, understandably upset, agreed that it wasn't an emergency and that reevaluating in the daylight was the best course of action. She helped Tom to bed and stayed with him for a while to ensure nothing unexpected happened. The rest of us finished unloading the boat, this time with extra care, which took longer than usual. Once we were done, we decided to order pizza for delivery. Noticing we were running low on beer, Jeff pulled out a blender and started making margaritas. Since I had to wake up early to return to the city and catch a flight the next morning, I skipped the margaritas. I still had some beer in my system, so my abstinence from the cocktails stood out during the first round. Angie went to get a slice of pizza for Tom and another for herself, returning to report that Tom was feeling better now that he was lying down with his leg bandaged. Everyone sighed in relief. With some food in our stomachs and our worries about Tom temporarily forgotten, the conversation picked back up. "Who else needs a margarita?" Jeff asked. "I'm good," I replied. "Come on, Grandpa, have a drink with us." Brian called out, and several others joined in with laughter. "I've got an early day tomorrow. I'll catch up with you all next time." You need a new man, one who knows how to have fun," Jeff joked. "You could use another one," Wen said unexpectedly, finishing her drink and shaking the empty glass. This caught me off guard. I had never heard anyone call her Gweenie before, and I remembered how much she once said she hated that nickname. Jeff hurried to take her glass and refill it, clearly enjoying the moment. Jeff prepared another round of drinks for everyone except me. As we finished the pizza, the conversation resumed. By then, Wen and I were on one side, surrounded by a group of drunk singles on the other. For the first time in our relationship, Wen didn't back me up. The others sensed the tension and started poking fun relentlessly. Wen didn't join in, but she also didn't defend me. I knew better than to argue when the odds were stacked against me, so I quickly stopped talking. But the others were persistent. "Why so quiet, Pete? Are you sure you don't want another drink? We can make it alcohol-free, so you'll almost feel like one of the real men here." cat got your tongue? Better get used to it, Queenie, he'll have a dozen cats by the time you get home on Monday. He's turning into a cat dad before our eyes. The final jab earned a laugh from one, and nothing embarrassed me more than that small laugh. I stayed still, but the group was too far gone to pick up on any social cues. I stopped paying attention to them and focused on one instead. Normally, her eyes would meet mine often when we were together, but that night, her gaze was elusive. She looked at me out of habit but was just as likely to be watching Alice, Jeff, Brian, Roberta, or even Noah. I also noticed Jeff starting to pay more attention to one, showing off in front of her. I doubted when realized it, but Jeff's instincts had picked up on the distance between us, and he began playing for her attention. The whole situation made me deeply uncomfortable, and I hated the thought of leaving when they're without me. I stood up, yawning and stretching, then positioned myself in front of one and extended my hand. She was drunk and looked at me with a question in her eyes. I need to wake up early, so it's time for bed, I said. He needs his beauty sleep. Noah shouted. Come on, old man, just because you can't keep up doesn't mean you have to drag Queenie with you, Brian added. Yeah, Queenie, tell the old guy you'll catch up with him later, someone else chimed in. I'm leaving for a few days, one. I want to spend some time alone with you, I said softly. She frowned at our friends but took my hand and stood up. We said our goodbyes and headed upstairs. It quickly became clear she was very drunk, but I managed to get her to promise we'd have breakfast at a local cafe before I left in the morning. Once again, she fell asleep before I came back from the bathroom. I woke her up at 7:30. She felt awful, and I wasn't in the best mood either. Downstairs, the aftermath of the party was everywhere. Pizza boxes, cups, and empty tequila bottles scattered around the living room and picnic tables. It looked like the aftermath of a college dorm party. Our breakfast was quiet, uncomfortably quiet. I had a terrible feeling about the rest of the weekend. I'd like you to come home with me this morning, I said. Really? Why? One asked. How could I explain that my trust in her had been shaken without making her feel defensive or resentful? I think it'll be hard for Angie and Tom to drive you back to the city without me, I said. And judging by how much those guys drank last night, they're not going to be in great shape after another night. I laughed to soften the criticism in my tone. They're just relaxing, and I'm sure Tom will feel better after a good night's sleep, she replied. Even if he doesn't, I can always get a ride back with someone else. Brian's car is already full. Jeff has space, he came alone. That's fine, one, but, you know I don't like it when you call me that. What? It's true. I know it's true, but why is Jeff allowed to call you that? She went quiet for a moment. It's always been like that, and there's no point arguing with him. You know he's not going to stop. Have I ever given you a reason to feel jealous? She asked. I've never heard him call you that before. It's not really about jealousy, I said. But yes, I am jealous. Of him. Then why don't you want me to stay? She pressed. It's not just that, I admitted. You didn't back me up when they started teasing me last night. For the first time, I felt like we weren't on the same team. I feel like there's some distance between us, and I don't like it. She smiled sadly. I love you, idiot. That hasn't changed, and it never will. You don't need me to defend you, you're doing just fine on your own. I don't want to manage on my own. I want to be with you, I said. Then come home with me, I urged. If you really want to stay, you can come back after I leave for the airport. Don't be ridiculous, she said. That's a lot of driving, and I'd just be stuck at home alone. I don't want to be alone either. I ran out of things to say, but my bad feeling didn't go away. There wasn't much else to do, so we paid the bill and returned to the lake house in silence. I went upstairs to pack my things while one started cleaning downstairs. There was no one else around, and I bet no one would be up for several hours. I packed my bag and wrestled with my thoughts. I had to trust her. I used to love her without question. We promised to be partners for life, but this nagging feeling wouldn't leave me. Finally, I made the bed, tidied up the room, and closed the door. I took a deep breath and headed downstairs. Gwen met me at the door and walked me to the car. "Last chance. Are you sure you don't want to come with me?" I asked. "I'll see you when you get back. Have a safe trip." "I love you," she said, kissing me tenderly. I left with a heavy feeling in my stomach. I stopped at Starbucks halfway home. While waiting for my order, I sent Gwen a quick text, "Stopped at Starbucks. I miss you." A minute later, her response came, "I miss you too. I love you." When I got home, I showered and packed my things for the trip. I arrived at the airport a little after 1 and decided to call Gwen. I could hear loud music in the background. "Hey, Pete. I miss you," she said. "I miss you too. I'm at the airport. How's Tom?" "Not great," she admitted. "Angie took him to the hospital earlier. She called Jenny, and Jenny said there's a high risk of infection because of bacteria in the lake water. That really scared Angie, so they left. So now there are 6 of you. We're calling ourselves the Nuclear Six," she said, laughing. In the background, I could hear shouts and chants of, "The Nuclear Six. I see you picked up right where you left off last night," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Don't be like that, we're just having fun. What's bothering you?" I sighed suddenly. "I lost the pen you gave me for graduation." "Oh no. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll find it." "When did you last see it?" "I'm pretty sure I had it at Starbucks earlier. I was taking some notes about the trip, but I didn't have it when I got home." "Check the car. I'm sure you just left it somewhere," she said reassuringly. "I hope you're right." There was more noise and music in the background, including what sounded like a blender. "I have to go before I fall too far behind, or they'll make me catch up all at once. Have a safe trip. I love you." "I love you too, Gwen." My flights were uneventful, and I landed in Portland around 8 p.m. local time. I sent Gwen a message letting her know I had arrived in Maine, but I didn't get a response. I rented a car and stopped at a local pub for a bite to eat before finding my hotel, the Antonin, and checking in. I sent her the details of my stay but still got no reply. I felt like I was on autopilot. I undressed and went to bed, and surprisingly, I fell asleep immediately. My emotions were running high, and I was completely drained. It wasn't surprising that I woke up at 2 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. I checked my phone, still no messages. At 5 a.m., I sent Gwen another message, "What's going on, Gwen?" Then, finally, I managed to sleep for about an hour around 6 a.m. But I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, showered, and went downstairs for breakfast at the hotel. I left for Vermont around 9:30 a.m., alone with my thoughts. I ran through various scenarios in my head, which helped calm me down. By the time I reached Newport, Vermont, I had plans for several possible outcomes. I found my motel, but my room wouldn't be ready until 3 p.m. I decided to walk around the town. I found a cozy little diner where I ordered a hamburger and an excellent chocolate milkshake. While finishing the last sip of my milkshake, my phone buzzed. "Hi, love. How was your trip?" Wow, that was inconsistent. I thought she'd seen my last message. I picked up the phone and called her, but it went straight to voicemail. She had rejected my call. I felt deeply offended and incredibly angry. I sent her a text, "What's going on, Gwen?" There was no response. I paid my bill, grinding my teeth, and walked out. I found a bench in a park and sat, or rather, swung my legs impatiently, as frustration and energy surged through my body. I needed to move to release it. I wasn't sure how long I stayed there, rocking back and forth, but eventually, I calmed down. Still, there was no word from one. After checking into the motel, I went for another walk, trying to clear my head and focus on preparing for my meetings the next day. I kept obsessively checking my phone, so I turned it off. I decided to leave it off until I was back at the airport on Tuesday afternoon. I told myself I could pause the rest of my life for 48 hours. Turning off my phone turned out to be surprisingly effective for my concentration. I slept reasonably well Sunday night. The local fireworks display at the baseball field lasted about 20 minutes and was fairly modest. On Monday morning, I arrived at my meetings with 6 furniture manufacturers a few minutes early. By the afternoon, I had nearly all the information I needed, but there wasn't enough time to get to Portland for my flight that evening. I went back to my motel and began working on the financial models and projections. I made significant progress, and by the time I left Tuesday morning, the project was nearly finished. I sent a status report to my boss via email before hitting the road. The drive was uneventful, and I returned the rental car with plenty of time to reach my gate. Once I boarded the plane, I took a deep breath and turned my phone back on. It took a couple of minutes for everything to sync, but when it did, I found a barrage of messages from one, but no calls. The messages began Monday morning. Interesting, I thought I knew what it meant. The first messages were apologetic, "I'm sorry for being absent. My phone ran out of battery, and I couldn't find the charger. We were having so much fun that we lost track of time." Then came regret, "I miss you. I hope you're having a good trip. What are you up to?" Next, worry started to seep in, "Are you okay? Where are you? Why aren't you responding?" Then anger, "This is so stupid." Followed by another apology, "I'm sorry. I'm so worried." Finally, desperation, "I love you. Please tell me you're okay." I wrote a response, "Everything's fine here. I forgot my charger too but finally borrowed one." One replied immediately, "What a relief to hear from you. I love you." She continued, "I've had some trouble at work. I'll be back tomorrow night." I replied, "That's fine." Her response came shortly after with a sad emoji, "I miss you. Sorry, I have to get back to work." I added, "Have you seen the pen?" Another sad emoji, "No, but I'll look for it. I love you." I nodded to myself and turned off my phone again. I took a deep breath. The course was set. My flight was delayed by half an hour, but I didn't mind. I checked into a residence a few miles from my office. Not feeling hungry, I went straight to bed. Once again, I fell asleep immediately, completely drained. It wasn't surprising that I woke up at 3 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. I checked my phone, no new messages. At 6 a.m., I got up and went to the gym. 40 minutes on the elliptical felt like 35 minutes too many, but I pushed through and felt better afterward. After showering and dressing, I called work to let them know I was taking a personal day and drove to my apartment. One usually left around 8:30 a.m., so I arrived around 8:45. Her car wasn't there, so I parked in my spot and went inside. I started packing. I collected my clothes and toiletries, fitting them into 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. I took a couple of framed sketches my mom had drawn for a class, my laptop, wireless keyboard and mouse, the jar of coins from my desk, my yoga mat, and my foam roller. My bike was in the storage unit, but I didn't have room for it yet, so it would have to wait, along with the furniture. I loaded everything into the car and returned to the hotel before noon. After unpacking, I opened my laptop and began researching divorce proceedings. Our assets were intertwined, but since we earned roughly the same and contributed equally, the division should be straightforward. I hoped Wen would agree to mediation, it would save us money and maybe some bitterness. I focused all my energy on the task, suppressing my emotions. The pain and anger were overwhelming, but I knew I had to keep them in check, or they would destroy everything around me, and perhaps myself as well. Wen usually got home between 5:30 and 6 p.m., so I didn't expect her before then. I thought about confronting her but realized I couldn't handle it. The pain and anger would be too much if I had to face her in person. I'm not sure how I managed to wait until 6. I must have just stared at my desk, looking at my laptop. When I snapped out of it and realized it was time, a strange sense of calm descended over me. My preparation helped me focus on what I needed to say in the most difficult conversation I'd ever have. I called her. She was clearly surprised to hear from me. "You're back early?" she asked. "I got back yesterday." "Yesterday? But you said," I lied. "Just like you." "What? What are you talking about?" I didn't lie. Her voice sounded hollow. She knew I knew something. "Please, Wen. Stop lying. I know. I know everything." "What is it that you know?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Pete, you're scaring me. What's going on?" She wasn't convinced, but she knew I was onto something. "Please, respect me a little, Wen. I know." She began to cry softly. "Know what, Pete? You didn't sleep alone on Saturday or Sunday night." "I know everything," I said. Wen cried harder. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Pete. I don't know what happened. We were drinking, and then we played spin the bottle and truth or dare." "It doesn't matter," I interrupted. "But I lied." It did matter. I had hoped, somehow, that I was wrong, but her confirmation of infidelity crushed me. How did you find out?" she asked. "How do you think I found out? Did Brian tell you something?" "That would be just like him. Jeff said he wouldn't." Another stab to my heart. I had lost my wife, a good friend, and probably his brother too. The pain was excruciating, almost overwhelming, threatening to drag me into the torrent of betrayal. But I focused on the conversation and the words I needed to say. "It doesn't matter. I hope we can settle this through mediation." "There's no need to complicate things," I said. "What do you mean by mediation? What are you saying? I can't be married to someone I can't trust. My heart, Wen. I can't." No. You can't mean this. Please don't do this. I love you so much. I need you," she begged. "Your actions say otherwise," I replied. Please come home. We can talk about this. We can go to therapy. I know you want kids, we can start our family. Please, Pete. Please just come home." "I was home today to pick up some of my things," I said calmly. "We'll have to divide our belongings, but that should be straightforward. You can have first choice of the furniture, the TVs, and anything else." Wen was sobbing uncontrollably now. "Please, no. Please, Pete. Please don't leave me. I love you. I only love you. Please." If it had just been Saturday night, I might have tried to save our marriage, I admitted. But Sunday night? That wasn't an accident. And I can't accept it. No, Pete. Please, no. Don't leave me. I love you. Please. I'm going to hang up now, Wen. I'll be in touch. The divorce wasn't entirely amicable, but it wasn't hostile either. Mostly, it was filled with sadness and occasional outbursts of anger. Wen was consumed by remorse, just as I was consumed by my decision. She tried to meet with me to explain what had happened, but I refused. I didn't trust myself to be in her presence. I would either forgive her, hurt her emotionally, or both. And I thought I already understood what had happened. Wen was spontaneous, and her connection between the physical and emotional was much weaker than mine. Add to that a lot of alcohol, a weekend of flirting that probably meant little to her but everything to me, and someone as persistent as Jeff. It all made sense. But I didn't want to hear her explanation, and I cut her off sharply whenever she tried. When insisted on therapy, and the mediator thought it was worth exploring. I was strongly opposed, but when my refusal began to poison the process, I relented. We had 6 joint sessions and 1 individual session each. During my individual session, I discovered that Wen and Jeff had been casually dating when Wen and I first met. The day Jenny brought her to the lake was at Jeff's request. Wen had never been interested in him romantically, but they had casually dated for a couple of months while she and I were starting our relationship. Wen denied having any other lovers after we became exclusive, but she was desperate to tell me what had happened during that Independence Day weekend. I believed she wanted to ease her conscience, but I refused to hear it. She may have confessed everything during her individual session, as I expected. However, we made no progress in therapy. Wen was consumed by guilt and needed some kind of forgiveness. But my trust in her was completely and irrevocably shattered. I couldn't imagine continuing with her as my partner. After finishing therapy, Wen called me many times, often crying and begging me to come back. I hated hearing how lost she sounded. In the end, she had no choice but to accept my decision. When we resolved all the details, she accepted the divorce with as much grace as she could muster. Our parents were devastated. I didn't tell Mom and Dad any details, I directed them to Wen. I don't know what she told her parents, but she took the blame when speaking to mine. She didn't reveal what happened, but I think they were able to read between the lines. Our friends were less surprised. Brian and Noah weren't known for their discretion, and stories about the wild weekend spread quickly. At first, Jeff was embarrassed, but as with many things, the best talkers eventually come to light. He started bragging about it. It didn't win him any new admirers, but most of his friends already knew his flaws, so they just chalked it up to Jeff being Jeff. The couples in our group blamed themselves for not being there, for Wen and for me. There was a lot of guilt, and no one wanted to take sides. I was the wronged party and an old friend, but I was also a loser who had been betrayed by another friend. Every interaction with former friends became painful, awkward, and sad. I started avoiding them. I think Wen did the same. There was just too much suffering. One friend, however, made an effort. I was leaving the office one night around 10 p.m., and Matt was there. I didn't know how long he'd been waiting, but it was typical of Matt to simply show up when he thought it was needed. "Hey, Pete," Matt said. "Matt. How are you?" "Pretty bad." He looked me in the eyes, no pity, no challenge, just concern. "I'm sorry. Jeff can be like that sometimes." "Yeah," I replied. We looked at each other for a few moments. It wasn't strange, sentimental, or cheesy. We were two friends who had shared everything for years and knew each other well. I nodded and spoke first. "Take care, Matt. I wish you a happy life." He looked a little disheartened but nodded firmly. "Thanks, Pete. You too." We said goodbye without shaking hands. With nothing else to fill my free time, I buried myself in work. That refuge gave me money and experience, but after a couple of months of showing clear signs of depression, I decided to see a therapist. It didn't take long to realize that my lifelong hometown had become an emotional minefield, filled with constant reminders of my failed marriage. I started looking for work elsewhere, and when another boutique firm in White Plains, New York, offered me a position as an associate partner, I accepted. I moved during the holidays and started my new job on January 2nd. I was surprised to receive a call from Wen on what would have been our wedding anniversary. I hadn't heard from her since I moved, a month or more before the relocation. I was curious. "Wen," I said. "Hi. Pete. How are you?" "Getting by, I suppose." "You could be better." She sounded devastated. What's going on? I have your pen. Ah, the pen. The instrument of our divorce. You can keep it. No need for me to remember. Jeff's sister found it. You left it behind. Why are you telling me this? I was scared. Scared of what eventually happened. I could feel it coming, though I hoped I was wrong. You have no idea how much I wanted you to send me a message saying you'd found the pen. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. But you only asked me to come home with you once. I said quietly. I never planned this. I never thought something like this could happen. We were all friends, it felt like the safest space possible. Yeah. Well, we learned. I miss you so much, Pete. Goodbye, I miss you too.